One of the things we started to see, Dr. Anna Marie and I, as we worked year after year, is many people came to us that we were absolutely, positively sure contracted disease from clothing that they were wearing. And only one book ever did I find that addressed this issue. One book that was in and out of print so quick 30, 40 years ago, nobody read it. And I started to then collect, as I did with other subjects that I've written on, science, data, information, and personal experience working with people. And by doing that, it became very clear that we had other lonely voices in the world that were doing magnificent work to expose how dangerous particular clothing was and how it directly related to cancer, mental illness, neurological problems, etc. It also opens up a whole new door to the world of garment manufacturing. We're in the communities that literally have slave labor. So you can buy inexpensive jeans at the Gap. In these factories, they actually work them until they die from disease. And they're all so poor, they literally bring their kids in after they're dead so that you can buy inexpensive jeans. Any of you that shop at the ungodly, un-American stores like Walmart, they deserve a lot worse. Don't walk into that non-American store. That's an anti-American store. And bottom line is, when you start to look at all of this, you say, wow, something else I have to concern myself with. And you better. Now let's just review some of the things here as rapidly as we can. Why the emperor wears no clothes. When you start to look at all of this, when we start to see what clothing really is, it's amazing. Ornamenting the human body, whether with paint or tattoos or clothing, seems to have always been our natural impulse, but was a secondary consideration to confront and protection from the elements. We really were so strong years ago that we'd be in a place like New York in our indigenous state, probably without clothing on at this time of the year. You and I run outside when it's 30 degrees and we completely freak out and want to go back into our 75-degree homes. And so part of this became cultural indoctrination, and as we became so-called civil, do you understand what the word civil means? Uncouth, I really think, but civil actually means we conform. We fit into the civility of a particular cultural indoctrination. Some of the earliest sewing needles made from ivory and bone have been carbon dated to about 30,000 years ago. So we started about that point, obviously, in small groups or tribes of people to adorn our body as we became silly and went further and further north. Now, the natural state of affairs for humanity at the beginning, we were nomads that moved from place to place. We would certainly not be in Long Island, New York, or whatever this would have been called thousands of years ago at this time of the year, and we certainly wouldn't be in Florida in August. We would probably be in northern Canada. And so people really didn't need to worry about clothing until we started to settle, and they were certainly not what we'd call civil at that point, but they started to settle, and that we're going to address tonight and tomorrow, about how we've gotten into the mess we are so you know how to get out of this mess. The Industrial Revolution mechanized the textile industry so that the mass production of clothing became both possible and profitable. Cotton, flax, wool, and silk remained the mainstays until the petrochemical revolution of the 20th century, which brought synthetic fibers made in chemical laboratories. So after the Second World War, the oil industry, the petrochemical industry, started to realize they weren't making the same amount of money because people weren't killing one another in a war condition. So they had to invent new ways, new outlets of revenue. And one of the many devious and insane things they did is say, let's start to create plastic clothing. And you know that as polyester, nylon, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That studies that were done show that you could wash a garment 1,000 times, it could be a decade old, 10 years old, and it still emits about 96 to 97% of the same gastric fumes it did the day it was manufactured. Now, those gastric fumes just don't evaporate and disappear into the atmosphere. They go into something called the human pores on the skin, the largest organ of the body. And if you look at studies after study, they show that that is indicative of disease. 1924, rayon was created, nylon 39, acrylic 50, polyester 53. We said after the 70s we'll never wear polyester again. So for the youth here, they changed the name for you. It's called microfiber now. That's what polyester is. Same show, just like with drugs. Once they realize a drug is harming you, they don't get rid of it most of the time. They change the name of it most of the time. Spandex. How do you like that one? That's so you look sexy with those yoga uniforms on. So you go to do yoga to become healthy, and you're putting what into your body? Chemicals. Much clothing is manufactured from synthetic chemicals. Even the fiber used for natural fiber clothing is typically grown with synthetic chemicals, unless it is organic. Many of these chemicals are toxic to human bodies. We actually estimate that 25% of all the pesticides on the planet Earth is used for the cultivation of cotton. I'll repeat, so I just said. So even myself, who I don't always find organic cotton shirts, everything's natural, all the suits, all of the clothes I wear, but the fact is, it was most likely, with this shirt, by the way, grown with chemicals. And so there's things that we'll talk about later if you have questions on that, how to resolve that. As a further challenge to health and safety, most of the cleaning agents used to wash or dry clean clothes contain chemicals that can trigger adverse physical symptoms. Near Jandy's health store here on Long Island, one of my great alumnus friends who healed herself of a catastrophic disease had a son that was so excited that he literally became enthralled with the idea he wanted to have a dry cleaning service. He wanted to make a living. And he collected pennies for years and finally got the dry cleaning service, and he went in. The city came in and said, you're going to have to clean up all the noxious, toxic waste that's here. And he said, well, I just bought the business. And they said, well, this is part of the stipulation. Even if you bought it today, you've got to clean it up, because they explained to him this is the most dangerous cancer-causing chemical known to man that we use in dry cleaning. Now, here in the New York City area, you start to notice all of them are, quote, organic cleaners made with soy. But when I approach people who are not, I say, why don't you now go organic? They tell me that the cost to transfer a shop like that to an organic cleaning is prohibitive in most cases. But why don't they make laws? And why don't they subsidize the oil industry? Why can't they subsidize that when we know, governments know worldwide, the most carcinogenic, cancer-causing chemical in history is dry cleaning fluid? And it doesn't go away, by the way. What we dump today, your great-great-great-great-grandchildren are going to be enduring. Consider the babies and young children often place clothing in their mouths and then chew and suck on the fabric. This is very dangerous since the natural detoxification system of children's bodies aren't fully developed. As estimated, 8,000 chemicals have been employed to transform raw materials into clothes, according to The Ecologist magazine. Now think of what I've just written and articulated there. Just to manufacture clothing alone, they have 8,000 varieties of chemicals, all dangerous for you, that they employ in this. And maybe this is why they work people until they die and then bring their offspring in to work in these garment factories in Indonesia, China, etc., etc., etc. But you're happy, you look good. Don't worry about it. You look good in the process. Synthetic clothing now commonly contains such toxins as formaldehyde, formaldehyde flame retardants, and perfluorinated chemicals like Teflon fibers to give trousers, skirts, and other apparel non-iron and non-wrinkle durability. This I didn't even know until I investigated to write this book. My colleague, research assistant, lives out on the West Coast. He said to me, you know, we can't finish this book. I said, why? I said, I've finished it. I'm sending you the... He said, no. He said, send me to Berkeley. They're having an international conference against formaldehyde and fire retardants on clothing. And I said, formaldehyde? Now here I was writing the book on clothing. I didn't know this. He came back on Monday. He said, okay, big shot. He said, go into your wardrobe and see all your 100% cotton shirts and see how many say no ironing on it. And I pulled out 4, 2 of which happened to be my favorite shirts. He said, now bring them in the backyard, put a mask on, and burn them. He said, because they have formaldehyde on them. Now, how many of you knew that until I just said it? I didn't know this several years ago. And what do you think formaldehyde does? If I want to save a body, preserve a body, what do I put it in? This is deadly stuff. It kills brain cells. Any of you ever open up a jar with a frog in it and take a good inhale of formaldehyde? How do you feel at that point? Forget it. Let's move on to the next one. Health impacts are accumulating. Synthetic clothing became mainstay in the 1960s, which means its chemicals have been in contact with human skin for just half a century. In those same 50 years, according to the World Health Organization, the industrialized parts of the world have experienced the following. Up to 1/3 of married couples today experience fertility problems. Now, one of the things you girls got boys to do, because we wanted, to always keep you down until the 60s. And then women said, wait a minute, we're going to talk back. We're not going to let you keep us down anymore. So you got us by the 70s, you got us to wear panties. A man would never have worn panties in the 60s and before that. What the hell is this stuff? These panty-looking, colorful things you stuck on us. So you guys took over really quick with one fell swoop. You got us in underpants that looked like girls' panties. And once that happened, we didn't have these trousers that we were very loose in and free in, and our testes were able to do what they always did throughout history. They started to realize infertility became a big problem, because if you stick testes up into a man's body and they get hot, guess what it kills? Sperm. So it's not only a female problem. Respiratory disease rose 160%. We're looking, where's there mold on the wall? How about the carpet? How about, oh my God, how about the shirt I'm wearing? How about the polyester bra that I have sticking my breast up so men are going to be happy I have perky breast? Not turkey breast, maybe turkey perky breast, I don't know. So it's insanity, I can tell you, women did not invent bras that do that. It had to be some masochist as a man that did that. This is in European and North American preschoolers. Contact dermatitis and other skin ailments have become widespread. 1 in 2 males and 1 in 3 females will develop cancer. Now, we're not saying this is the only cause of cancer, but we are saying this is definitely a major player, or Brian Clement and Anna Maria Clement do not write about these things. And do we write about this the first day we think it? No, we spend decades thinking about it, observing it, reading research on it, accumulating what's real, and then presenting it to the public. So we don't have an idea or a philosophy. We're now telling you factual information, and it's up to you what you decide to do with truth. You can either say, like I was in Brentwood, California a month ago, speaking to all the Hollywood types, and they just couldn't get over when I got onto this subject. And one really confused pretty girl in the back of the room stood up and said, you mean to tell me I've got to get rid of my whole wardrobe? I said, baby, the way you look, I wish you did. I didn't say that. I was thinking that. And I said, you mean to tell me your wardrobe is more important than what I've just talked about for the last 20 minutes? That the way you look and the money you spent on your wardrobe is more interesting to you than cancer and brain disorders and neurological concerns? I said, well, maybe you shouldn't get rid of that, because it will have one less person who's self-involved on the planet if you continue to wear those clothes the way you are. And that's my sentiment. If people aren't willing to make changes, why should you be here? Nature is loving, but the fact is, it's real. It will let you do exactly what you want to do. It's all about human what again? Perception. Women now have a 1 in 8 chance of developing breast cancer. Interesting. So what really provoked Anna Marie and I to start thinking about this seriously decades ago is we noticed that women that had polyester bras on had significantly larger numbers of breast cancer concerns than women that didn't wear polyester bras. The granola girls from my generation, the braless girls, or the hippies who basically wore the rare cotton under bra. We found out then that there was a 6-time greater chance for you to contract breast cancer if you wore man-made fiber bras. I will repeat this because I know you don't want to hear it, because in this room I promise you today at a health conference that you're supposed to be listening to truth, I would imagine that 85 to 95% of you have man-made fiber bras on. Because it's almost a life's work to find a cotton bra now. It's almost a life's work to do it. If you don't get on the internet, if you don't know the... Now, we're going to make you all pull your shirts up in a minute, by the way. You didn't know that before you signed up, did you? Wait till we get the guys to pull their trousers down. See if they're wearing those sissy girl stuff. We can do that for you girls, because if they're wearing that stuff, don't marry them. They won't have babies. But if you happen to be a big bosom woman, you basically have an 8 to 9 times greater chance of contracting breast cancer with the synthetic bra that also has something called a what in it? Underwire. Now, Anna Maria last night, if you were listening astutely, said to you, we just had a very healthy yoga instructor who, by the way, ate a vegan diet, come to us with cancer. And how she came to us, she picked up this book and she read Killer Clothes and said, oh my God, not one doctor, I've been to 4 holistic doctors, ever mentioned clothes to me once. And she came, not the doctor, came to the realization why I now have breast cancer is because where that underwire was, me doing yoga 6 days a week, leading people as a health expert, being a vegan, is really how I got the cancer. Could you imagine how perplexed this young lady was, who for year after year was doing the right thing, but it was underwiring and synthetic fiber clothing that literally was the clincher. That's what caused the breast cancer in her case. Once again, polyester, nylon, 6 times greater, big bosom, polyester, nylon, underwire, 8, 9 times greater chance. Don't listen to anything else Anna Marie and I tell you this weekend. Go home, take your bras off, burn them. But again, you've got to get the same mask on that I had to with my formaldehyde shirts, because you may get cancer from the fumes. Most people don't realize that our skin is our body's most important elimination organ. Now, when you think about elimination, you think about the front and the back. Number 1, every day we eliminate about 2 pounds of waste through our skin. You do not eliminate 2 pounds of waste if you're a good pooper from your behind. 2 pounds of waste from your skin every day. This is why it's so incredibly important to do things like saunas, dry brushing, showers, baths. I cannot emphasize the importance of this enough. And it's not just for hygiene, it's for health. I would say health here, hygiene here. If you hold back any percentage of these toxins from being released, they are accumulated in body fat and body organs to become like a time bomb primed to detonate as some future malady. So the more toxins you hold in. Now remember, most of the time we've been on this earth, we were nude, always in moderate climates because we were following the food chain. Our bodies perspired. We all exercised. Today, by the way, the statistic stands that's now stood for 3 decades, that less than 5% of the American population exercise enough. Now, if you got up early in the morning, as I do, or stayed up, I guess, late at night and watched television, you would think everyone in America exercised 24 hours a day. Now, why I watch those commercials, they have some pretty hot bodies on there. But the reality is, they're exercising in this piece of equipment. Now, I used to buy equipment like that and bring it to Hippocrates. Then I realized, wait a minute, let them buy it. We'll go to the yard sale in 2 months and we'll buy it from them because they don't use it anyway. So somehow in America we think through osmosis, if I have a card for the local health club, that's enough. Or I have an exercise equipment that I drape my clothing on top of, that's enough. But remember, it wasn't an option. Everyone exercised 100 years ago and before. And everyone sweat. And nobody was eating anything but organic food because there was no other option. You didn't have a choice at that point. Hey, could you give me the stuff with the chemicals on it? Matter of fact, if you said to my great-grandfather, give me the stuff with the chemicals on it, he would have punched you in the mouth. What are you talking about? You're going to put chemicals on my food. Today, we said, well, the University of Schmuckdom and Dr. Schnahucky, they did the research, and it's okay because Dr. Schmahucky says pesticides aren't going to really hurt you. Now, who do you think funded that study? Who do you think told you that wine is healthy for you? The alcohol industry. Who do you think tells you coffee drinking makes you smarter? That's a sure sign of stupidity if you believe that. Who do you think that tells you meat is good for you and you can't live without it? Look behind all of this stuff. Again, everything today, pretty much other than a handful of morsels, is called checkbook science. And all the so-called authorities, even the holistic authorities, most of them are schmahutzes, are going to go right down the party line, like now everyone's on the fish oil thing. Fish oil thing. And as soon as I write this and it starts to slowly leak out, whatever we say 5 years from now, they're all going to be on that line. Oh yes, well now we realize that although your arm fell off, fish oil wasn't that good. They'll come up with some other product, It's always a product. You ever notice that? It's always something you can buy. Rather than saying, by the way, it's not what you buy first. The buying stuff is that much. It's what you do first. The do first is really what it's about. Did you know that medical evidence shows that longer a woman wears a bra, the greater her chance of developing breast problems, including the risk of breast cancer? Now, you know how many people we interviewed? We were stunned. How many women wear bras 24 hours a day? That's like insane. But we were shocked that 30% of the women we interviewed never took their bras off. You know why? They didn't have intimate, good, honest relationships with their husbands. So they felt so insecure in their own life, they wanted to look perky in the middle of the night if their husband happened to get up to take a leak. Now, can you imagine that? So they wore bras all of the time. And young ladies don't breastfeed, and the number one reason they give us for not breastfeeding is the fact that they didn't want their breasts to look old and saggy. Now, where's the disconnect with that? When you have a baby literally is in your body. It comes out after 9 months. You go through that remarkable, godly, spiritual process. And then you say, well, gee, I'm not going to breastfeed because I'm worried about how my breasts look. Where's this whole thing about the child and breastfeeding? I don't know. I just don't get it. Synthetic fibers pose such a fire and burn hazard that the U.S. Marine Corps prohibited its troops in Iraq from wearing synthetic clothing while off base. Do you know why? There were 3 times where it was so hot in the summer there that their synthetic clothing went on fire and they got very severe burns. You could almost do that here in some of the August. It's going to get worse and worse, as you see, as everything starts to heat up more. By the way, up until now, the hottest year in history for the autumn and early winter is this year. Last year was the record before that. How many of you know that? Somebody that's older like me, this time of the year here, it would have been major snowstorms and below zero. When I was a kid growing up, that was it. January, that was it. There was no other option. Medical studies have found that synthetic fibers help to induce muscle fatigue and muscle motor disorder, especially bad news for competitive athletes. So now the new clothes are nano clothes. They actually put silver in clothes so you don't have to wash them and smell. That's the new generation. In my book, Killer Clothes, I write about these things. You would almost think I'm making it up. You know what's really weird for me when I do this research? Sometimes I even feel awkward writing down the truth. That's how bizarre it is today. It's so incredibly... I say, who sits in a room and figures this nonsense out? Who can possibly validate a legitimate reason for putting this onto the market? And what's up with these people? You almost would think that they are intentionally doing this. Well, I'm not sure with clothing. I just think greed is the number one problem. That people who are unconscious and have one objective, to gain more stuff. When you don't have you want more stuff. Remember that. When you have you don't need the stuff. No you, let's fill me up with stuff. That's really what's happening. It's not as evil and sinister as you think it is. It is in some ways. But I think a lot of this is just greed that we see. Studies have determined that synthetic fibers induce electrostatic discharge, and as a result, the wearing of tight synthetic clothing and undergarments is a contributor to infertility in men. Now, how many of you wear microfiber underwear at this point? Now the new trend is, when they first put panties on guys, they were all cotton panties. Now, 78% of them happen to be synthetic panties that they put on you. So if you heat it yourself up with cotton, can you imagine what a great job you'll do with plastic? How many of you have ever wrapped plastic around your hand and sat it there for 5 minutes and watched what happened to it? Do you think there's much of a difference with polyester undergarments? Or these tight yoga? So you all look like pretty boys and girls when you're at the yoga class, so you look sexy to everyone else? You have a sexy dying body going on there. Our freedom to choose and wear natural clothing has narrowed over the time as the lower cost of synthetic crowded natural fibers off the marketplace. Because it's a lot cheaper to mine oil and blow clothes out with that one than it is to go out and hand-pick cottons at this point. And so that's why you see more and more of this pushed. And other than a handful of the great designers today that have a token amount of organic wear for the highly conscious and well-off, you don't see anything but synthetic fibers being used. I won't name any names, but America's number one best known of all designers, I challenged her to co-author this book with us. Obviously, you don't see her name on this, do you? Because she claims she's conscious, just like a lot of you claim you're environmentalists and eat chicken and fish. Okay. It's time that we start to tell the truth. Guess what? I found something out. You'll be able to gain all the money you need to by telling the truth. You don't have to lie, you don't have to cheat, you don't have to steal. It's not as easy to tell the truth, and you're not as well liked, but the fact of the matter is, at the end of the day, you're going to be prosperous in your heart, soul, and spirituality as well as your pocketbook. You don't have to lie. The United Nations Food and Agricultural Organization declared 2009 to be the International Year of Natural Fiber. They're so concerned about it, the public isn't, because you don't know about what I'm teaching you. The United Nations had to step in, like they did with cell phones last year, when only 3 governments in the world, Russia being one of them, Sweden being 2, and France being 3, told the truth about cell phones causing brain cancer, because no other government, including your government, had the guts and balls to do that. So what they did is they stepped in. Well, they had to step in on clothing because they know what I'm teaching you here now. They know the disease rate is going up worldwide. They know that we are abusing slave labor people in these countries around the world so you can be adorned in garments looking good at your yoga classes. The need to revive and promote the sustainability of natural fiber clothing industry worldwide came about because, as the United Nations group declared on its website, the natural fiber industry has lost a lot of its market share due to the increased use of synthetic fibers. And when we take away the natural fibers that used to be picked by very poor villagers in faraway lands around the world, we put it in the hands of the petrochemical industry. The same guys that gives you the Valdez and the Gulf dump are going to profit more because you choose to buy inexpensive, cheap clothes at your local store or very expensive junk clothes at your designer's store. Consciousness means consciousness. You can't just say, I eat right, that's conscious enough. I exercise, I om and pray, that's enough. No, none of this is enough in and of itself. Every act is a spiritual act. Every act is a biological. Every act is an emotional act. And you cannot dissect, separate any of that. When you're taking a poop, it's a spiritual act. And I don't say that as a joke, because everything is omnipresent consciousness at all times. There's nothing but availability for maximum understanding or less. Humanity aspires to and acquires maximum understanding. Subhumanity, the masses, choose not to go for maximum and like to be in status quo. It's much easier to go along with a group than to say, hey, look it, I'm going to go one step further. It doesn't take a lot to do this, by the way. We retain the power to minimize risk to our health by taking simple precautions and practicing mindfulness about the clothing choices and buying options that we still have today. If it were the dream and hopes of the chemical industry, we wouldn't have natural fiber clothes anymore.